Hey, this is Aaron from Digital Crafts, and I'm going to show you a quick program that I wrote that uses vanilla JavaScript and calls an API, which is a library from a third party out there, someone else's data that you're using, someone else's database, and gives you the weather of your current location. So pretty simple, get your weather, enter your current location. Let's say you forget and you hit submit. Say, hey, not found, please enter another location. Let's put in Seattle, which is where I'm at. And it says in Seattle, you look at the sky, you will see clouds. Your temperature is 61 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's just sad weatherman saying it's cloudy, and it's Seattle, so it's always cloudy. So let's say you type something in or you misspell it. It says, hey, this isn't found, so enter another location. You fix it, and you get this. All right, let's go over the code a little bit and kind of explain what I did and how I got here. So here's the concepts that we're going to be covering. So Bootstrap, which is a user interface framework, it basically makes things look a lot nicer, saves you a lot of time for writing CSS. And then in CSS, I use Flex and Grid System. I'm really a fan of both these because these make it really helpful to put your elements exactly where you want them and stay exactly where you want them. So if you want them exactly in the center, if you want them kind of a couple elements balanced out, if you want something on the end or the beginning, it'll stay there no matter what size your screen is. It's really, really helpful. And then in JavaScript, we're going to go over fetch, which is how we're going to call our API. OpenWeather is the API, and getElementById, which is how we're actually going to change the HTML elements and get the information that we want from them. So in our main HTML file, right over here we have Bootstrap 4. This is a CDN, Content Delivery Network. And what this is these are addresses that get us all the Bootstrap information we want, all the library access to it, without having to put any of it locally. And this is really great because let's say Bootstrap finds a bug and they fix it. If I had it locally, I'd have to download that new information. But right now, I don't have to worry about it because any changes they make, I already get access to. Right down here, main.js and style.css, these are my local files that I'm using. You could put these all in the same file, but it's generally bad practice. You want to have your code separated so it's easier to read. And what's common practice, if you're not using any front-end frameworks, is you create a file for your JavaScript and you create a file for your CSS. Now later on, if you learn Vue, Angular, or React, these are front-end frameworks, JavaScript frameworks that have their own style and their own unique way of doing this, and they have different ways. So over here I have a container class, which is a Bootstrap class. And what this does is it makes sure that the elements are not taking up the entire screen. It kind of pushes everything in so you've got a little space on the side. This is a form group. This is a Bootstrap element, makes the form a lot better and nicer looking compared to just regular HTML. Over here in the submit button, I have submit form. This is JavaScript. This is a call to straight JavaScript saying, hey, when you click this, go to submit form function, which is in my main.js. Down here I have a tag for errors and another tag for results. Let's take a look at the CSS real quick. So I put margin top at 10%. Normally when you design a website you have a menu on top, but I don't have one here and I don't like my content to be right on top, so main 10% gives me some space. For the errors I use the display of flex, and I wanted my content to be justified center. And padding, when you see padding like this, the first is for top bottom, the second number is for left right. I didn't feel I had enough padding on the top, so I added and bottom, so I added about 10 pixels, but on the sides I was fine. For the results page, I did a grid. And the reason why I did a grid is because I wanted all my results to be on the same page, on the same div, in the same line, and I'll show you exactly how that works in a second. And then my H3 results, I wanted basically to be centered and to be display of flex, so it's centered. And I misspelled 3. Sometimes it happens when you're coding and you forget to spell a word out correctly, so I just fixed that. Now let me show you exactly what's going on with the grid system. So if you look here, I've got this little animation and then the text. This is all in a grid system. If I got rid of either of these lines, you see how this text kind of comes down here? And I think it looks a lot nicer to have this image right here and your text right here, which is why I did that. All right, let's jump into the JavaScript. This is kind of the logic behind it, what's going on. So HTML are your elements, CSS is the styling, and your JavaScript is what makes it do something. So it starts with the submit form, and I have reset old values. And I put this down here, and what I noticed is that if I didn't have these reset old values, then if I had an error, and then I put in, let's say, Seattle, the error wouldn't disappear. And vice versa, if I had right data and then I put in, let's say, wrong data in there, the error bar would appear, but the old data of the correct information would not disappear. So I just had this reset value. Now I could have put the code in here, but this is you have about 36 lines from top to bottom. It's pretty long. So any chance you can do anything to kind of make it a little shorter, you do. And then I also did the same thing for get URL. So if you go down here, I take the location and the API, and I use this thing called string interpolation. There's an old way of doing strings in JavaScript, and then this is kind of a ES6, it's been around for a couple years, way of doing it. And you take, these are tick marks, which are right under your escape key on the top left of your computer, and then you put in the string, and it knows it's a string, and then see this little $sign and squigglies? This is a variable that you're putting in there. I think it looks a lot nicer than the old way of having quotation marks and then a plus and then more quotation marks and a plus. It's just a lot simpler and easier. So once I'm done with that, then I do the AJAX call. Now there's two different calls that you can do normally. There's AJAX and then there's a full page refresh. Full page refresh is that if you're going to a new page. AJAX is just a little bit of the site that you want to be refreshed. If you do a full page refresh every time you just need to update a text box, it doesn't really look that good and it slows things down. So what's going on behind the screens in Fetch is that it takes this URL and it's doing something called a get call. A get call is exactly what it's doing. It's getting the information that you need from this URL right here. Now, one quick thing I forgot to show you is that if you put the API, and you see I have my key right here in the city right here in the URL, this is the information that you get back from it. This is a really easy way to test to make sure your API calls are correct before you actually write all your code. So it's using a get, it gets that information. You can also use a post and delete, but we don't need either at this point. Post is when you're putting something into a database. You'll use that when you have access to it. Over here, we're calling a third party. They don't want us to have access to they don't want us to change their data. And then this this is something called a promise. And the way that happens is that your code is on your computer and it's working really, really fast. But then you've got to do this call that goes out there, gets information, and comes back. And it's still fast, but it's not as fast. So this then motion says, hey, we're going to wait for a quick second. We're going to do everything else that we can outside of this fetch statement, but we're going to wait until to fill out this information until we get it back. It's like, imagine if you order a pizza. You can either wait by the door for 30 minutes or continue doing what you're doing, and when your doorbell rings, you get your pizza. That's what this is. It's a promise. It's so response. The first thing that response does is it gets the data and it converts it to JSON. So when you get information from a database, it's a little funky looking. There's always some weird stuff, weird characters going on. It's not really the most readable. So .json turns it into something. Well, it turns it into this, which you can see it's a lot more readable. It's easier to navigate versus what you had before. You don't have to do a lot of parsing and get rid of a lot of weird characters. And then the next then says, okay, we're going to take this data. Data is a random word. You can use whatever you want. So is response. JSON and this is a method, so you have to use this. So I'm going to say if data message. So what I notice is that if I put in a wrong city or didn't put any information, this message would appear, and it would only appear and said, hey, something went wrong. So I set the text, and right down here, I have two methods, or functions, whatever you want to call them. I use them interchangeably. You have set text and set display. Set text basically says, okay, we're going to get this element by ID, and we're going to change the text. The set display is saying, okay, we're going to get this element by the ID, and we're going to change the display of it. So you see over here, the display is none. Later on, I have display of flex because I want it to be display of flex, and it's because I want to center it. So I said, okay, let's set the error message right here, and we use the location and said, hey, we didn't find this location. Find another one. Then I use BG Danger and Text White. These are both Bootstrap classes. BG Danger gives that red background. There's also Success Danger, BG Success, which is green. I think it's because of the color of money. BG Regular, I forget, which is blue. BG Warning, which is yellow. And then I also changed the text to be white because I want it to stand out a little bit more. And then I set the display of error and flex so it shows up. Now if everything comes back, we need to basically get this information and display it. So first thing I noticed, and if you look at this data right here, it's not 288 degrees in Seattle right now unless you're thinking in terms of Kelvin. I'm not really sure why it does this in Kelvin, but I used this to convert it into Fahrenheit. Then I sent the text and I said, hey, this is the city you're in. This is the weather. If you look at the sky, you'll do this. This is a little funny right here. So let's take a look at this in the data. So Maine right here, weather, which is right here. See these little brackets here? That means this is an array. So there's only one array going on, but you have to specify which array it is, which is why it's 0. And then .main gets us this information here. So I say data.weather array 0, which is this, which is the first array, .main. And then I kind of, if you notice, I did something very similar for data.main.temp. So data.main.temp. So I set the text for all of these. Then I add this little GIF that I wanted to add. I figured it would be a little more fun than just having the text. So if you go down here, this is, if it's cloudy, it has the sad rain man. If it's clear, it's sunshine. If it's rain, it shows rain. Snow, it's someone doing the snow angel in extreme. I found a GIF of a comet coming towards Earth. And then at the end of this, there's this catch statement. Now this catch statement is only called if something doesn't work with the API call or if there's a bug in here, if you do something wrong. And it just prints out this error message saying, hey, something didn't go right. You can dig in more. There's certain specific errors that you can go in to get better errors. But for the sake of this tutorial, I just left it as this. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please let me know, and keep on coding.